Mists of Tirna Scithe is making a return in Season 1 of The War Within. This iconic Shadowlands dungeon has 3 interesting yet difficult bosses. Let's break down how they work. Starting off with Ingra Maloch, this fight is a 2-target cleave encounter with a soft enrage, meaning that your group will need to really make sure they're hitting the DPS check before things spiral out of control. The premise of this fight is that the large tree man, once brought below 20% health, will stun Ingra Maloch for a short period of time, making him extra vulnerable to your group's attacks. When pulling this boss, players should keep an eye out for Ingra's Spear Bolt cast. You'll want to kick this as often as you can since overlapping damage can prove to be lethal. The large tree man will then cast a frontal at the tank. Just be sure to aim this towards the wall if possible. Occasionally, the tree will also cast Tears of the Forest, causing a plethora of swirls to flood the arena. Dodge these and try to keep them as stacked as possible since any and all swirls will leave residue in their wake. Lastly, Ingra will cast Fear, making all players flee in the direction away from the boss. Players can position themselves properly to get feared in a good direction. Eventually, Ingra will make himself pseudo-immune to damage, which will be accompanied with heavy AoE pulsing damage. Healers are going to need to be ready to counter this, and when this part of the fight does occur, your group will want to make sure the tree is near the 20% health mark, or you are in for a world of hurt. Once the tree hits 20% health, blow as much damage you can into the boss while making sure you can still phase the boss again shortly. The big tip I have for this fight is to try to stay stacked and move as a group. It'll make the fight much easier to heal and to dodge swirls. Keep repeating these mechanics and Ingra Maloch will fall. Mistcaller is a 2-phase encounter, with each phase having a health threshold that is required to be reached. These thresholds are 70%, 40%, and 10% health. Anyways, Mistcaller has a few mechanics. First, we have Dodgeball. This will have 5 arrows targeted at players based on their current position. Simply move out of the way before they get launched. Next, Mistcaller will cast Freeze Tag. This will spawn a Vulpine Spirit on or near a player indicated by the blue circle. This will then fixate a player, chasing them down. If this little fox connects with any player, all players within 8 yards will take heavy damage and be stunned for 8 seconds. Try not to let this happen. Lastly, the boss will cast Patty Cake. This is an ability that can only be interrupted by the tank or whatever player has threat at the time. Tanks, just kick this. If it does go off, you'll be disoriented for a long time. Once a boss reaches 70% health, phase 2, or I guess the intermission, will begin. Mistcaller will become pseudo-immune to damage and will spawn 4 ads in each corner of the arena space. It's up to the players to decide which ad stands out amongst the rest. For example, if there's 3 leaves and 1 flower, then you're going to need to kill the ad with the flower above its head. If it's 3 that don't have a circle around the icon and 1 that does, then it's the one that has a circle that needs to be killed. Luckily, we now have the new ping system, which should allow groups to quickly identify the correct one and then swap to it, rather than trying to either type it out or place down a world marker. During this phase, it's worth noting that there will be pulsing group damage along with Mistcaller's general mechanics. Once again, this phase happens at 70% health, 40% health, and 10%. Good luck beating the mind games. This boss has seen a slight rework since Shadowlands. Tred'ova is a big old bug and arguably a 1-phase and 1 intermission encounter. Starting off the fight, the big mechanic is actually called Acid Expulsion, which will spawn swirls underneath all players' feet that will deal damage moments later. What's unique about this fight is that for every cast of Acid Expulsion, it will attempt to follow your previous movements. So if you dodge to the right the first time, the next time it's cast, it's not only going to spawn a swirl underneath your feet, but also a swirl to your right based on the distance you traveled. This isn't too complicated of a mechanic, because it only saves up to your last 5 movements, but it's worth mentioning that you want to keep your movements small and try to prevent using abilities like roll or blink during this part, since it can really mess up your other group members. Along with this, the boss will also spawn a few ads through accelerated incubation. I recommend trying to lead them underneath the boss for cleave, but coordinated groups may also decide to CC them when possible. The new mechanic here is actually called Coalescing Poison, which will suck all players towards the boss, just try not to be inside of the circle. This ability actually is what replaced the Parasitic Infection before, which was a mind control cast that needed to be kicked. Next, we have Mind Link, which will typically target the tank as of the beta testing. Make sure you're spreading out to break the links or you're going to keep taking damage. Lastly, the boss will cast Consumption, which will grant the boss a large absorb shield and cause a lot of chaos with giant swirls. Dodge these and deal damage to break the shield. The cast will deal large amounts of group damage as long as the shield persists. Once it's broken though, you can actually kick the cast to stop the phase from continuing, and after that it's a simple rinse and repeat. And that pretty much wraps it up. Best of luck in your keys this season, and a big shout out to all my Patreon supporters because they are what make these videos possible. Peace.